We have Texas football today, ladies and gentlemen. Hook 'em horns. And also, we are going to look at updated Week 11 Pickems over on Underdog. One, to see if we like any of these Pickems. And two, so we have a better idea of realistic expectations on who we should be starting this weekend. Now, at the very top, obviously, these are the special Pickems. Amon-Ra St. Brown more than less than half a total yard. Russ more than less than half a total yard. We'll get that Russ one if you are new to Underdog with code FLOCK, but that doesn't tell us if we should be starting these guys. The first guy we're really going to be looking at will be Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett, no way in hell you're starting him. They have him at 187 total yards and 10.5 fantasy points in a very tough matchup going up against the Cleveland Browns. You're probably benching everybody in this game. Najee Harris right now, they have at 53.5 total yards. You're most likely going to be benching Najee Harris. Brutal matchup against the Browns. Jaylen Warren, they currently have at 61.5 total yards. You're benching Jaylen Warren. Brutal matchup against the Browns. Deontay Johnson, you are benching. They have him at 45.5 receiving yards. Very unlikely to score a receiving touchdown. 2x multiplier for him to score that touchdown. Very tough matchup, as we were already saying. Now, if you really wanted to take Deontay Johnson for more than 4 receptions, I wouldn't fault you. Maybe you have some dink and ducks here. We're also going to be looking at the George Pickens reception total. Because even if this is a very tough matchup, you can still see a lot of these shorter area plays. Now, going over to Cleveland, going to be benching everybody we can. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, 10.5 fantasy points for his more than less than 168.5 passing yards for his Underdog Pick'em. Brutal game environment. This is going to be the lowest scoring game of the week or damn close to it. We want nothing to do with it. If you were going to start someone, it would be Jerome Ford. I just don't have too much interest. His Pick'em's at 9.75 fantasy points more than less than. I mean, it's a whatever matchup and at the same time, just horrible offense. Amari, they've had 43.5 receiving yards. You don't play Amari with no Deshaun Watson. Elijah Moore, I wouldn't even mind if you want to go fewer than 31.5 total yards. How bad this offense is going to be. Please bench Kareem Hunt. They have him at 40.5 total yards. I'm sitting up a prayer that Kareem Hunt has a touchdown for our best ball teams, but by no means someone that we can start. And going back over and looking at George Pickens, I would not fault you if you wanted to go through and bench George Pickens, but take him to have at least 3 receptions in this game. Kind of going with the squeaky wheel wide receiver, right? The diva wide receiver complaining. Not starting him, 35.5 total yards for his Pick'em. But if you really wanted to look at more than 2.5 receptions, wouldn't fault you for it. Going over to the Packers, similar story here. We're not really wanting to play anybody. 226.5 passing yards for Jordan Love. There'll be some volume to go around. Aaron Jones, someone that we are going to play, though. I mean, right now, he's seeing about 55% of the snaps in Green Bay. Decent matchup against the Chargers where he should be high scoring. Dylan, we're going to binge. Going over to the receivers, Christian Watson continues to be at the top of the team in targets. I mean, hell, they have his Underdog Pick'em at 7 targets this week. If you were going to go ahead and look at something with this Christian Watson Pick'em, I would not go with more than 7 targets. If I had to pick something, it would be more than 3 receptions. In reality, I'm probably staying away from Christian Watson. I'm staying away from Romeo Doubs. I'm staying away from Jaden Reed. They have all about the same, all around 34, 33 receiving yards. And the issue is, in this offense, you are just going to have the ball spread around to so many different options that they're not intriguing. Best ball, sure, one of them can pop, but in reality, we don't know what to expect now. Obviously, you're starting Justin Herbert. Obviously, you're starting Austin Eckler. Obviously, you're starting Keenan Allen. Don't even feel like we have to talk about it. They have Quentin Johnston, who scored the touchdown last week with a 2x multiplier to score again. I think that's going to be a stay away. I would assume that Quentin Johnston does not find that touchdown. They've been 37.5 receiving yards. In reality, you just start the big 3 here in this offense and you don't even consider anybody else. Now, going over to Vegas, you have Jacobs at 87.5 total yards. You have Devontae Adams at 66.5 receiving yards. These will be stayaways for me. Jacoby Myers, 37.5 receiving yards. Essentially, they're telling us you play Jacobs, you play Adams. Nobody else is interesting. I mean, this is a massive spread on this game where right now the Miami Dolphins offense has the highest implied team total of any team in the NFL. So here in Miami, this is where we're starting a lot of guys. You have Tua at 261.5 passing yards. We want to get him in. Going over to what we have, I don't care about Jalen Ramsey. I mean, obviously, Ramsey, good NFL player. Come on. I mean, I'm focused in here on fantasy options, ladies and gentlemen. So let's scroll past these bums and let's instead look at some offensive guys. Now, Raheem Mostert, they currently have at 56.5 rushing yards, but even odds to score a touchdown. That is 100% something that I need to be pointing out, and that if you are terrified of Raheem Mostert with Etienne coming back in, you can say, oh, I don't think he scores a touchdown. In reality, I just think that this tells us you still start Raheem Mostert. You have an applied team total of almost 30 points in this game for these Dolphins guys. Mostert is a must-start option. Etienne is a must-start option. Tyreek Hill is a must-start option. I know 90.5 total yards seems like, oh, that's easy. Let's go take the more than. In reality, this team's probably not going to have to throw the ball in the second half, so I don't think this is the week to take more than 90.5 receiving yards on Tyreek. Jalen Waddle, must-start guy. They made 65.5 receiving yards. Now let's move on past this, and let's go over to this Arizona game, where it should be a higher scoring contest overall, ladies and gentlemen. And Kyler Murray vaults him into that must-start option this week, based on what you had with the rushing upside last week and him showing us that he is 100% healthy. You have Kyler Murray with 32.5 rushing yards, and that's going to put him as that must-start guy. I mean, if you're looking at what that 32.5 rushing yards gets you from a floor-ceiling perspective, I mean, it's just a cheat code in fantasy. Going over to what we have with the rusher, you have James Conner, 14.5 rushing attempts, 59.5 rushing yards. You probably start James Conner. This will be a higher scoring game, so I am excited about playing these guys. Hollywood Brown, they have 57.5 receiving yards, so this is like well ahead of what you have with someone like Amari Cooper, right? And this is, in my mind, one of the best ways that you can be looking at these underdog pick'ems and seeing the buckets that you should expect these guys in from a median projection perspective. Because obviously, underdog has so many different data points going into these, and underdog's not going to be putting out a bad pick'em, because if they are, they can lose a crap ton of money. But if you're looking at like Hollywood Brown saying at 57.5 receiving yards, in comparison, if you're going to be looking at what you have with like Amari Cooper at 42.5, it just tells you that there's no reason you should ever consider playing Amari Cooper over Hollywood Brown based off the volume that's expected in both offenses, right? So I think that you want to go through, I think you want to be taking Hollywood here. And of course, if y'all wanted to check out any of these pick'ems, and one other interesting thing with this, Trey McBride, 54.5 receiving yards. McBride dominated last week. McBride seeing a ton of volume. They have Trey McBride significantly higher than someone like George Kittle. So Trey McBride, I think he's maybe higher than Dalton Kincaid at this point. Now, trust me, I would still rather have Dalton Kincaid. And instead of going with more than 54.5 receiving yards, if you were going to do that, I'd probably rather just look at I would probably look at the target total, or maybe even take the multiplier 1.75x for the touchdown. In reality, there's no way in hell you could ever convince me to take the more than 54.5 receiving yards, but it does tell us that he is a must-start option. And if you wanted to check out any of these underdog pick'ems, if you think Mason, these guys have no idea what they're talking about, I'm so much smarter, which I can tell you you're probably not. I'm not. I know that for damn sure. You can find that link in the live chat, in the description, in the comment section. Promo code FLOCK, 100% deposit match, plus our rest of season fantasy football rankings and tiers. And promo code FLOCK is going to be getting you a Russell Wilson special pick'em, more than less than half a total yard for this Sunday as well, ladies and gentlemen. So make sure you are taking advantage. Now, going over to CJ Stroud, going to be an high-scoring game, like we were saying. If you look at the over and under this game, it is very high. Start Stroud. Nico Collins, I was initially looking at maybe going with him to have fewer than 4 receptions based off the last month that he was healthy. He was only averaging 5 targets per game. But Noah Brown is going to be missing this game. So with no Noah Brown, I would say that you can no longer take fewer than 4 receptions for Nico Collins. And Nico Collins probably does vault into being a must-start option. Dalton Schultz is must-start at tight end. Tank Dell is another must-start player at wide receiver. When you take away someone like Noah Brown, it's just going to condense this target tree a little bit more. And then we don't care about any of these other guys outside of Devin Singletary. And I drafted an embarrassing amount of Devin Singletary in underdog drafts this offseason. Like, to be completely honest, it looks like it may work out based off this Dameon Pierce injury. But hindsight being 2020, I think looking back, it was a bad decision to take as much Devin Singletary as I did. And literally everything had to go right for it to work out. And I feel like I am just getting extremely lucky in that case. But with all that being said, I'm rooting for the guy this week because I'll win a lot of money if he does well. But for him to have a baseline expectation that he's going to score a touchdown does seem very aggressive, and I'd probably go fewer than half a touchdown on Singletary. Now, going over to Tennessee, Derrick Henry, probably got to start him. DeAndre Hopkins, you probably got to start him. Nobody else is interesting here. I think everybody knows that. Going over to Jacksonville, I mean, if you're looking at Trevor Lawrence, they have him at 260 total yards, so it's kind of whatever. Travis Etienne must start, 94.5 total yards. Calvin Ridley, I mean, I wouldn't mind if you wanted to go fewer than 51.5 receiving yards on Ridley. I mean, I'm not starting him anytime soon. Christian Kirk, must start option. Evan Ingram, I wouldn't mind if you wanted to go through and say that he was going to have more than 6 targets. I would be looking at the target total here rather than the reception total. I think that if you look at that volume that Evan Ingram's had so far, he has played himself into the must-start options of tight ends. Now, going over to Dallas, you start Dak Prescott, not too much to talk about. Going over to Tony Pollard, I know a lot of people are very concerned with Pollard here, and they're saying that this is someone that you can't start. Ladies and gentlemen, the baseline expectation for Tony Pollard is for him to score a touchdown in this great matchup against Carolina. Now, if you really were saying Mason Pollard's a bum, Dowdle's going to get more work, you could go through and you could take fewer than half a total touchdown. All I want to point out is he is someone you need to start. For the love of God, please be starting Pollard this week. You start Lamb. I'm not starting Brandon Cooks. He's at 36.5 total yards. Jake Ferguson, not really too interested to start. I'd definitely go with someone like Evan Ingram over him. Going over to Carolina, really the only guy I'm looking at is Adam Thielen. Adam Thielen, they have 55.5 receiving yards. So right in line with like DeAndre Hopkins this week, right? Really tough matchup against Dallas. So like Miles Sanders, Chuba Hubbard, they only have 53.5 total yards. I don't really want to start any of those players. Now going over to Chicago, we've had Justin Fields, that buy low candidate over the past 2 weeks. Fields, you have to start him based off 47.5 rushing yards being his underdog pick him, right? The man's just going to have so much rushing production, you got to start him. You have to start DJ Moore as well. Nobody else is interesting outside of DJ Moore, Justin Fields, and Cole Kmet in this offense. Going over to Detroit, I'm starting all the Lions we can. Start Jahmyr Gibbs at 71.5 total yards, but 3.5 receptions, should be involved as a receiver. You start David Montgomery. You start Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, obviously, all these guys are plays. You start Sam Laporta. If you are looking at implied team totals, right now the Detroit Lions have the second highest implied team total in the NFL this week, only behind the Miami Dolphins. Now going over to the Giants, Tommy DeVito, gross. Yeah, start Saquon Barkley. We're not super excited about it. Barkley, they have at 94.5 total yards. The Giants have the lowest implied team total of any team in the NFL this week. Should be a disgusting offense. And I do want to stand by, probably benching everybody here but Barkley every single week. And I probably wouldn't mind if you wanted to go through and trade Barkley. Now, Sam Howell, you actually have less volume in this offense than a typical projection. 271.5 total yards. Keep in mind, it's going to be a game where they can just go through and run the ball over and over again. And initially I was thinking, well, maybe it's interesting to say that Brian Robinson's not going to score a touchdown here. But based off the matchup and the fact that you also probably don't have Antonio Gibson this week, I think that Brian Robinson is a must-start guy. I think that it's reasonable to expect that Brian Robinson's maybe close to 50-50 to score a touchdown, especially if you have no Gibson in this matchup. Now, going over to our next offense, looking at Tampa. Typically, this is an offense where it's very simple. You start White, you start Evans, you start Godwin every single week. But it's a brutal matchup going up against San Fran. Right now, Vegas is telling us that this will be a bottom 3 offense in the NFL this week. Rachaad White, you have at 75.5 total yards, 4 receptions. So on a reiterate, non-PPR format, I'm probably looking to get rid of Rachaad White. Full BBR league, he's still someone that you have to start, though, based off the receiving volume. Mike Evans, you start him, just lower expectations dramatically. And Chris Godwin, I wouldn't mind if you wanted to bench him, just given how bad of a matchup this is overall. And yeah, for the love of God, do not be starting someone like Cade Otton. Now, you can start Brock Purdy if you want. You look at the projection of Purdy, very similar to someone like Sam Howell. Going over to CMC, CMC's a must-start guy. CMC, highest total this week, 104 total yards. Deebo Samuel, must-start guy, 64.5 total yards. Brandon Ayuk here, 67.5 total yards with a healthy Deebo, with a healthy CMC, with a healthy George Kittle. So I wouldn't mind looking at a few of these lower thans on Brandon Ayuk. One that stands out for me is fewer than 4 first downs for Ayuk. The only way you lose out on this is if Brandon Ayuk picks up 5 or more first downs. So if I had to find a pick'em that I prefer with Ayuk, I would prefer to go like fewer than 4 first downs rather than fewer than 4.5 receptions, even if Ayuk is the deeper option here. And I would rather go fewer than 4 first downs than fewer than 6.5 targets. And then Kittle, 44.5 receiving yards. I mean, we've been talking about Kittle as that sell-high guy with Debo coming back in. But yeah, if you are looking at this in comparison to what you have with, say, like Trey McBride, they have Trey McBride as a significantly better option this week. Now, going over to the Rams, Puka and Cooper Kupp are both must-start guys. But with that being said, I would go with fewer than 13 targets on Cooper Kupp. I mean, to have that as a base level expectation, even with Stafford good to go, is crazy. You're looking at that being a pace of 221 targets here for Cooper Kupp if that was his projection every single week. So while I really like Kupp, I mean, this is an example, right? You look at Cooper Kupp, they have him at 13 targets and 4.5 first downs. Whereas if we go back and look at what we had with Brandon Ayuk, you have Brandon Ayuk at 6.5 targets, 4 first downs. So just to give you an idea, they have Brandon Ayuk for half the amount of targets, but the same amount of first downs as Cooper Kupp. That's why I'm looking to go with the fewer than first downs with Ayuk, fewer than 13 targets for Kupp, even though obviously these players do play a little bit of a different role. Now, going over to Puka must-start option. I think it's a good buy low candidate as well. Stafford coming in. Both these wide receivers should be pretty solid options. And then nobody else here in LA am I interested in. Going over to Seattle, Kenneth Walker, probably starting him right. Zach Charbonnet, desperate play if you need him. But you could go with him in a full PPR format where he is getting every single snap on third down and every single snap in the 2-minute drill. Right now, this should be a little bit of a higher scoring game overall. DK Metcalf, they've had 68.5 receiving yards. You have to start DK Metcalf. Tyler Lockett, we don't know if he's going to be good to go. If Lockett were to miss, then I would say JSN is someone that we're going to play. Now, going over to the Jets-Bills, you still play Josh Allen. He's at 30.5 rushing yards. You got to get him in. James Cook, 71.5 total yards. I wouldn't mind going with the fewer than if Fournette were to play, but I have no idea where the hell Fournette is. Stephon Diggs, they currently have at 76.5 total yards. So the expectation for Diggs is significantly lowered in comparison to like the other elite level wide receivers this week, right? Like you have Tyreek Hill at 90, Stephon Diggs at 76. But with that being said, this is still a player you have to start no matter what. You still have to start Dalton Kincaid no matter what, who's had 48.5 receiving yards. Even if it is a tough matchup against the Jets, this is still an offense that has a ton of production to go around. Going over to the Jets, you have Breece Hall, 83.5 total yards. You start him. You have Garrett Wilson currently at 66.5 receiving yards, 10.5 targets. You start Garrett Wilson, start both those players, bench everybody else. Super simple here. Now let's go over to the Minnesota game, where we're going to be looking at Joshua Dobbs as someone that is very interesting given the rushing usage. 5.5 rushing attempts for his underdog pick'em. Obviously, it's hard to project this out currently when we don't know if Jefferson's going to play. I will update y'all as we get more injury updates later today and tomorrow morning, the status of Jefferson. You start Hawkinson no matter what. Jordan Addison, probably not someone I'm excited about unless we have no Jefferson in this offense. Now, Russ, obviously, we're going to go with more than half a total yard. That's only going to be a pick'em you get if you're new to Underdog. With code FLOCK, you'll get the Russell Wilson special pick'em, plus a 100% deposit match, plus my rest of season fantasy football rankings and tiers. But yeah, I mean, in terms of starting Russell Wilson, not too excited about it. Javonte must start option without he's taking over this backfield. They have Javonte like 89.5 total yards, like significantly higher than someone like Breece Hall, right? So they're telling us Javonte Williams is much better than Breece Hall this week. Sutton, he is in that range of someone you can definitely start if you want. I'll say the touchdown's probably going to come back down to earth soon. And then nobody else is exciting in this offense. Going over to the game where everybody should be excited, we have the Eagles taking on the Chiefs in Arrowhead. Jalen Hurts, 36.5 rushing yards for his pick'em, 277.5 total yards. DeAndre Swift, currently at 81.5 total yards. You got to start him. And side note, we're one like away from hitting 100 likes on the stream. If you have not done so already, hit that like button. A.J. Brown, they have at 85.5 total yards. You got to start A.J. Brown. I mean, we already kind of know this. You start Mahomes. Isaiah Pacheco, currently sitting at 70.5 total yards. Tough matchup. You probably start him. And then really, we already know these are great offenses. I will say lower your expectations in comparison to what they would naturally be, or at least my lizard brain, right? My lizard brain, I see the Chiefs, Eagles, and I go, oh my gosh, it's going to be the highest scoring game this week. The over-under is going to be at the very top. And then you look, and it's like, okay, it's not like it's supposed to be a complete shootout with the projections here. So don't get overly optimistic with that game. Obviously, still start your studs, but it's not like this is going to be a 70-point, 75-point game. But I think that's all I have for y'all with this live stream. I really hope that we are able to help you out a little bit and just be realistic with the expectations for the guys that you are looking to start tomorrow. And of course, I'll be live later today giving you all the injury updates. Probably going to wait as long as possible. That way I can give you the most up-to-date injury news as we can. And also, I'll be live later tonight answering all your questions. I'll be live tomorrow morning answering questions. So if you haven't hit that subscribe button, and if you wanted to check out any of those Underdog Pickems, please make sure, link in the live chat, description, comment section, promo code FLOG, 100% deposit match, plus our rest of season fantasy football rankings and tiers. And on top of that, ladies and gentlemen, that Russell Wilson special pick on more than less than half a total yard. But I think that's all I have for you. Again, thank you so much for everything. I really do appreciate you. And I really hope I get to see you out in the live stream either later tonight or tomorrow morning.